how we felt about the sex we were having was the one thing we didn't talk about in our marriage. Like, we're both anxious about it. And because we both wanted to be good, we both mutually avoided the anxious topic of sex beyond, like logistics. And that we did that to keep the anxiety low in our relationship, not knowing the cost it was having in our sexual relationship. The theme for today's podcast episode is inspired partially by conversations I've had with a few people recently. And it's around the idea of good boy or girl syndrome, as they say it. And to me, good boy or good girl syndrome is the idea that I've been taught all along to be good, and good people don't engage or have sexual thoughts or feelings or fantasies because that's bad. And now that I'm married, I'm told that they're okay. I'm really struggling with that bridge. And I just want to say, I totally hear you, I totally understand you, because that's partially my story too. So I want to talk about the 3 mindset shifts that help me overcome good boy syndrome. And not just me, but what I've seen many other couples that I work with and see and have the privilege of associating with, but help them make that shift and transition too. So hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll have a much firmer grasp on what it means to be a good boy or good girl in the context of bring more goodness to your marriage, goodness to yourself, goodness for the world around you, and seeing the inherent goodness in your sexuality. As a youth, I was blessed with good church leaders that I really looked up to, and they had a great influence on me. I remember one particular Sunday, we're in our church building. It was built in the 80s, block wall construction. I'm in one of the rooms, and the lesson that day was about sexual purity, about being moral people. And the person who gave the lesson shared this story about a man this is back in the horses and wagon days. And he had to hire a driver to carry goods along this route. And there's a part of this particular route where the road goes up the side of a mountain up against a cliff. So he's interviewing riders and he's asking them, this particular stretch of the road, how close can you get to the edge before you're afraid that the cart will go over the cliff? And the first driver's like, I'm a very confident driver. I can get within 6 inches of the edge of the cliff and still make it and just be fine. The second person said, I am such a good driver that I can get within 1 inch of the edge of the cliff and not fall over. And then the third person the guy interviewed, the third driver, said, if I know that there's a cliff edge there, I am such a good driver, I'm going to stay as far away from the edge of the cliff as possible so that I don't even risk possibly going over the edge of the cliff. So the third person gave a very different answer than the other two, and he's the one that got the job. I liked that story because it taught me as a young teen that if I wanted to avoid sexual sin, I should stay as far away from situations as possible. Don't engage in anything sexual. This might mean don't share dirty jokes or don't watch movies with explicit sexual themes or bad language in it. Make sure you choose friends and date girls that have the same standards as me. Now, I'm not a very scrupulous person. I don't have OCD. I just wanted to do what's right, and I still do. I want to be a good person. So that really helped me. I remember 16 or 17 years old. I was at a summer camp. I did speech and debate in high school. I was at a 3-week debate camp, far from home, a different mix of youth than I usually hang out with. And on the 3rd or 4th day, I was with some of my friends walking past the girls' dorms. I guess they saw us and they started to undress in front of the window very flirtatiously to try to get our attention. And I turned away, I looked the other way, and I got myself out of that situation while some of the others stood back and cheered the girls on probably. Anyway, this idea of staying away from the edge of the cliff has served me well. And I'm really happy about my choices because they've helped me avoid problems, and I just wanted to do what's good. So fast forward, as a young adult, I'm engaged to be married to Emily, and I'm just really giddy with excitement for a new life together. And Emily is a very good woman, and she has such a pure heart. And I remember in this time, we had a devotional speaker at some church setting, and the speaker gave some advice to newly married couples in the audience. And he cautioned us to avoid unnatural sexual behavior. Now, I wanted to have a great, strong marriage. And if this guy had a strong marriage and he's telling us to avoid unnatural sexual behavior, well, guess what? I'm going to take that advice to heart. I'm not going to engage in that either. The thing is, I really didn't understand what unnatural sexual behavior was. He didn't define that. Of course, it probably would be very little inappropriate if he was very more explicit about what he meant in that setting. So my interpretation at that time was anything outside of PIV, that's short for penis and vagina sex, was wrong. And I don't remember that was explicitly said or not. I just remember things like oral sex or anal sex or just even manual stimulation or play would be wrong because it was quote unquote unnatural. Again, I didn't have much context to go off of. I just knew I wanted to do what was right. And this person said that. It meant a lot to me. And I wanted to be good. Now, my wife and I got married. We had a great honeymoon. Most couples complain about their honeymoon, but I look back. It was great. We loved it. The first few months of our marriage were fantastic. I can only remember positive feelings about sex. It just felt like sex was that natural evolution to our relationship and in our marriage. So, but now that I look back now, I think we mostly had sex when I was horny. And it got routine, meaning sex usually started and ended the same way. And I think I was primarily motivated by desire to be close to my beautiful wife and for me to enjoy an orgasm and the joy of sexual release. That's kind of really what directed our sexual relationship. And I remember enjoying sex. It always felt good. I always felt better towards her, and we felt loving towards each other. But I wouldn't say it was very creative or soul-filled experience per se, but we just didn't know any better, and that's what it was. And I think my wife and I carried a lot of anxiety about sex into our marriages too, but we didn't know any better. And I was very careful about what Emily thought about me sexually too, because I knew that if I upset her, it means it was very unlikely that sex was going to happen. So I'd sometimes not be completely straight with her or tell her what she wanted to hear. So I'd get on her good side, so I would increase my chances of getting sex later on. And that kind of put me in a situation where I was kind of a nice guy, so to speak. Nice is in also quotes. What I mean by nice guy is a person that doesn't really talk straight, really isn't fully honest, because you're more interested in how the other person perceives you than you being solid within yourself. Now, I didn't have words for that. I didn't have language for that back then. But looking back, I think that's the way it really guided and directed a lot of our sexual experiences. Now, in our marriage, I tended to be the one that initiated most of the time. And in the times that she did initiate, though, I felt like she was doing it for me, kind of as an act of selfless love, which I really appreciated. I also believed Emily didn't hate sex, but she probably didn't crave it like I did. And in our marriage, and I'm pretty sure we're not the only ones, how we felt about the sex we were having was the one thing we didn't talk about in our marriage. We could talk about finances and kids and planning vacations, but talking about our sexual desires or things we're thinking about or asking our spouse, heaven forbid, what they thought about the sex we were having. We just didn't talk about it. We're both anxious about it. And if you're anxious about something, it might, you could internalize that as it might be a sign that it's wrong to bring up or even discuss. And because we both wanted to be good, we both mutually avoided the anxious topic of sex beyond, logistics. And that we did that to keep the anxiety low in our relationship, not knowing the cost it was having in our sexual relationship. But of course, I don't think things were wrong or bad or pathological. It's just that was the stage we were at that time. And everything changed one day for me. We're 13 years into our marriage. My wife is pregnant with our 6th child. And during that time, a friend opened up to me about his sexual relationship with his wife. Now, this wasn't like other sexual conversations that I would tend to avoid, right? Because I wanted to be a good boy. This is a little different because my friend wasn't telling me these things to brag or to this isn't like bro locker room talk. He was telling me some really, personal things about what he and his wife did in bed, or out of the bed, too, for that matter. He wasn't sharing to brag, but his point of what he was telling me was that when he and his wife really invested in their sexual relationship, everything else in their marriage improved. And this was really hard for me to accept and to swallow. I wanted what my friend had. I wanted to feel a little bit of that glimpse that I saw in him and in his eyes, but that joy, that deep bond that he and his wife seemed to share. I wanted that. But the idea of talking about sex was hard. Also, the idea that good people shouldn't do sexually adventurous things, right? You want to stay as far away from that edge of the cliff as possible. And here's my friend doing some really fun, sexually adventurous things within his wife and enjoying it, right? I didn't think good people admitted that they like sex. And here I am with a really good person who admits that he and his wife really both like sex a lot. So another thing too is my friend talked about there's blogs, there's podcasts, there's books, there's good sources to go to learn about sex. And that kind of blew my mind. I thought seeking sexual information in and of itself was just a path down a slippery slope that'll lead you off the edge of the cliff and into something dark, harmful, or addicting. And I didn't want any of that in my life. Another thing that I struggled with after the result of this conversation was a thought that, my wife could actually love and crave sex. Now, my wife didn't hate it. And I don't think she disliked our sexual experiences, but to have her being the one that's creative and coming up with ideas, initiating and driving things, that was a really intriguing idea. But that would mean I'd have to talk to my wife about what she felt and experienced during sex. And then it would also mean me risking finding out that she's actually bored in sex and she's unsatisfied with me, but she's never told me because she didn't want to hurt my feelings. So that was kind of another barrier I had to overcome or think about overcoming in this. I also really struggle with the idea of seeking something more novel and creative in bed outside of, missionary position in the dark for 10 minutes and just being okay that other things are okay for couples to do and to actually really enjoy and do it a lot. So it all struggled because in my mind, I also knew logically that God created sex and we're married. So of course it's okay. It's quote unquote legal in God's sight. But I was unsure if learning to really like sex and enjoy it was actually an okay thing to do or not. Because I didn't want to do wrong. I wanted to be good. But I also didn't want to miss out on something great, like what my friend seemed to enjoy with his wife. So during this time, it really pressed on my soul a lot. What is right? Is it okay? What is sex to be like? And Emily and I had some really deep conversations about it. And we're both learning that there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot we probably need to finally grow up about and be an adult about it and face things. I'm also a big believer in the verse of scripture in the New Testament in James chapter 1, verse 5. And the way I understand this verse is that God grants wisdom liberally to all of his children and won't scold us for asking. I wanted to put that faith to the test. So I remember one day I fasted and prayed, and I really approached God really sincerely to help me understand if it was okay or not to pursue more sexual knowledge in my marriage. And I was expecting a flood of feelings and thoughts like the youth lesson I had about that horse-drawn carriage, driver steering far away from the cliff's edge, and expected a feeling of stay far away from sex or whatever. Or I was expecting, as a result of my prayer and my seeking, this heavy sense of caution. But to my surprise, during this time, I felt incredible peace and encouragement, and dare I say, even a little nudge to explore further. And that caught me completely off guard because it wasn't the answer I was expecting. But I couldn't deny that the feeling I did get was a confirmation of my prayer. So this new thought then entered my mind. What if, from the very beginning, from the genesis of creation, sex was a very good thing and designed to be enjoyed to its fullness, but that traditions and limitations of others, including myself, confined it into something small. I'm reminded of a story of a man whose dream it was to go on a cruise. He scrimped and saved his money, and finally, late in life, he had enough money for a week-long cruise journey. He brought cans of beans and granola bars because he knew he couldn't afford to pay for the dinners and the shows on the deck. But he enjoyed his journey, and he enjoyed visiting the ports, looking out of the porthole window of his little cabin. Then on the last day, one of the crew members asked him if he was going to join the rest of the guests for the final banquet, the extravaganza. I guess the crew member noticed that this guy liked to stick to his room. Anyway, he answered, I just don't have the money, so I'm going to stay here in my room. And then the crew member looked at him funny and said, that ticket you paid for, it's all inclusive from the very beginning. All the meals, the entertainment, the activities on board the ship, and even the activities in the ports, they're all part of the package deal. He paid for all of that. He had no idea he was living beneath his privileges. So when you view sex as the original good thing and something to live to your fullness of your privileges rather than something to anxiously control, your mindset changes in 3 significant ways. And that's what I want to talk about in this podcast today. The 3 mindset shifts that help you from, they call it good boy or good girl syndrome, into seeing the goodness in sexual intimacy. Now, before I proceed, I want to remind you that we have a few big events coming up. First is Valentine's Day weekend. We're doing a virtual getaway. This is where you send your kids to grandma's house, or you book a hotel room or Airbnb for you and your spouse, and you get to join me on Zoom webinar. Now, you're not on camera. This is Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday night in those 3 sessions. And I teach a sexual practice that, regardless how long you've been married, I promise you'll gain a lot out of it. And it's all about improving intimacy in your marriage to where it's not just about having sex, but it's about making love. And all those details you'll find on my website, getyourmarriageon.com/events. The other thing is we've sold out of our spring in-person couples retreat. But we have a new opportunity, and that is a cruise. We're setting sail in October 2026. So why not come and join us? It's like a retreat, but way better, way sexier. And you're already on vacation anyway, so it's just going to take things up a notch. And you get to work with me and my team over these 6 days, and I give you sexy homework. I'm bringing a boudoir photographer with me on this cruise, and we're going to do a deep dive on all things intimacy and the goodness and the helpful meanings that make sexual intimacy so special and precious in your marriage, all in this romantic, wonderful, fun getaway. So you'll find those details also on our site, and sign up soon before we sell out of that as well. The first mindset shift for me is you view our Christian ethics of chastity and fidelity differently. Rather than view them as restrictions or constraints, you view these as keys to living the good life, sexually speaking. Everything in life, by the way, of value needs protection to preserve its value. For example, if you have a prized vegetable garden, you'll protect it. You'll nourish it. You'll keep it free of weeds. You'll fertilize it and water it and make sure it can grow to its fullness. So likewise, if an all-wise God shares in our sexual joy and freedom, it would make sense that he'd give us boundaries and instructions designed to help us maximize the absolute joy we can get out of it, right? His wise guidance is there to help us maximize joy and freedom in sex, not constrict it. Another thought along these lines is that of all of God's creations, which all of God's creations procreate, humans are the only ones capable of actually making love in sex. Yes, dogs and monkeys, they can copulate, but they're not doing it for love. There's no love in it. Like, the dog isn't thinking they're like, is he going to stick around after the pups are born? Like, they can't make those meanings in sex. For humans, God's children, sex is not just about biological drive. It's deep with meaning and a very powerful language of expression. Someone once pointed out to me that in the story of the creation in Genesis, God commands his creations to multiply, but only to Adam and Eve he adds multiply and replenish. So the interpretation I like is that the addition of the word replenish implies that sex is far more than just having babies, but it's to replenish ourselves, our marriages, and ultimately the earth through it. The second mindset shift is this: the motivation to have sex changes dramatically. Sex becomes far less routine, or less about, sexual release of orgasm, and more about having fun and playing together. Because you can actually allow yourself to get creative, let your hair down, and enjoy sex because sex feels good, and it's a thrill being intimate and naked in mind, body, and spirit with someone that you really like. With my work at Get Your Marriage On, I get a glimpse into what goes on in other people's intimate relationships, and it's really inspiring to me, especially when I see couples embrace this mindset shift of sex as something one does to more about something a couple enjoys. I'll give you just one example of a wife. This wife used to be really careful about how much affection she showed her husband, because she was afraid if she kissed too passionately, she knew he'd get aroused. And if he got aroused, it would mean he would want to have sex. And giving him sex oftentimes meant she'd be inconvenienced. Even though she loved her husband, sex felt like a chore, one that she could do once in a while, but not all the time he wanted it. So she would habitually not kiss passionately or just hold back a little bit of affection, even though she missed the early days before marriage when they could just kiss really deeply and passionately and get really hot and bothered. But back then they knew it wouldn't lead to sex because they weren't going to cross that boundary before they were married, right? So the key to this wife was to embrace the thought that her husband's arousal was not a threat to her. Just because she, quote unquote, got it up didn't mean she had to put it down, so to speak. And part of the shift in their marriage, now of course he had a role to play in this too, but he helped her see that arousal for him felt good, that it didn't hurt, and he just liked feeling aroused for arousal's sake, that for him, it didn't need to lead to something more explicit. Just being aroused alone was a joy for him. Once she could really understand it and be free of that and not see his arousal as a threat to her or encroaching on her freedom, then she could enjoy kissing passionately. There's no obligation behind it. And guess what? Now that she had given herself permission to sometimes say no, meaning I'll kiss you, but we're not having sex as a result. We're not having intercourse as a result. It made it that much easier to give herself permission to say yes on those other times also. And so sex, when it did happen, was a lot more passionate because it wasn't out of obligation. It was about something she wanted to enjoy too. And sex in those circumstances doesn't feel like a chore. And this is what this couple learned. It's what real foreplay is. It's having foreplay all day long, all the time, with a big emphasis on the word play in the word foreplay. It's playful, it's fun, it's flirty, and you can actually flirt and enjoy with each other with this mindset shift. The third mindset shift is you become more comfortable with the paradoxes and complexities of intimacy in sex. James Fowler was an American theologian and minister in the United Methodist Church and is well known for his contributions to the theories in psychology around faith development. He theorized that a person's faith journey goes through distinct phases. He actually came up with 7 different distinct phases of a faith journey development. For example, young children internalize symbols and stories more literally. Think like Santa Claus as a child. It's a very literal thing for you. And as one gets older, like as a youth, you tend to understand symbolism better. And as a young adult, one generally has the capacity to establish their own internal authority or conviction of matters of faith, rather than solely relying on others' faith. In Fowler's theories, he says the later stages point to the capacity for an individual to be more comfortable with the paradoxes and complexities in life. Now, there are many examples of paradoxes in Christ's teaching. For example, have you heard this? He who saves his life shall lose it. He who loses his life for my sake shall find it. That's an example of a paradox. Another is Paul's body of Christ metaphor, how the whole body benefits when we each bring our own best effort. It's the paradox of having unity and diversity together in the same organization. Paradoxes are important because they pit 2 contrary ideas where the truth is found somewhere in the middle. Proving or testing the contraries is complex, but pushes our development because you realize life isn't always so black and white. And by the way, sex in long-term marriages provides plenty of paradoxes to balance, contraries to prove, and it's not always black and white. One example is the idea of spontaneous and responsive desire patterns, which you've probably heard described many times on this podcast. It's not that one is superior to the other. It's not that, for example, the responsive person in the marriage doesn't have to be responsible for initiating sex, or that the spontaneous one is a de facto more sexually evolved one in the marriage. The truth is actually somewhere in the middle of this paradox. And as you gain more capacity to solve this paradox in your marriage, you'll find more joy, freedom, and ecstasy in your sexual play and union. Another paradox that I love is the dirtiness of sex. That's the very thing that sanctifies your marriage. By dirtiness, I mean what I mean. The dirty thoughts, the innuendos, the showing of skin, the flashing each other. Even sometimes the carnal or very human side of sex. It's the things that turn you on that you'd be embarrassed to admit out loud. It's the things that make you blush or bring that erotic smile to your face when you think about it. For some, it's the idea of being tied up or done up and down against a wall. It could be power play in the bedroom. For others, it's the idea of being naughty in sexually thrilling things, like even if it's just in fantasy. For others, it's a deep sensual enjoyment of incredible physical pleasure, even in non-traditional areas of your body, the kind that makes the world stop and your knees buckle when you experience that pleasure. So I just named some ideas of things that are dirty, but I just want to be really clear here. The broadness of sexual novel experiences you have in your marriage isn't the definition of dirtiness per se. For example, a couple could be doing a very risky sexual activity, but be very immature in the way they do it. On the other hand, two very mature individuals can enjoy vanilla sex that's deeply connecting, deeply meaningful, and completely satisfying. So the measure of your marriage isn't how many of the boxes you check on the yes, no, maybe list, on the sexploration list of things you want to do or are willing to do. That's not the measure. The measure is how much of a self, how much depth you can bring to it, how much dirtiness of the dirty that you do enjoy that you can tolerate. So there is an inherent dirtiness in really good sex. Yet at the same time, really good sex is the very thing that strengthens your bond as a couple. It's probably because it requires a high level of maturity and capacity for tolerating the inherent anxiety of sex in order to enjoy sexual play like that, or to have sexual experiences mean very deep things that words are inadequate to express with the person you're married to. And the growth you have to go through in order to enjoy all of those things, that's what sanctifies the marriage. And it's when sex changes you. You come out of the bedroom as a transformed being. You're a better person because of it. And isn't that real goodness? Can you think of a better way to bring more good to your marriage, to your spouse's life, and to yours than a soul-expanding sexual relationship? Wouldn't that inspire you to be more honest, true, loyal, pure, benevolent, and going about doing good in your marriage? So if your goal, like mine, is to be a good boy or a good girl, it's found in being true to your sexual nature. It's restoring the original goodness that your sexual capacity has in store for you and your marriage. And it's not about living beneath your privileges. It's not about burying your talent or keeping it in a box to stay small. But it's about developing your sexual self to its fullness to bless the lives of those around you. All right, so in conclusion, there are 3 mindset shifts to move from so-called good girl syndrome or good boy syndrome to bringing more goodness with your sexuality. Is first, view our roots of our Christianity are that God created sex to be good from the very beginning. And of course, he's going to give us guidelines that help us maximize that. And so don't live beneath your privileges. Maximize all the good you can with the sexuality you have. Bring it forth and make it a replenishing aspect of your marriage. That's the first mindset shift. The second is your motivation for sex changes dramatically. Instead of viewing sex as something routine or something you do for someone else or an exchange of orgasms. By the way, orgasms are great. There's nothing wrong with orgasms alone. But your motivation changes. You see sex as a creative way to really have fun with your spouse. It's a way to play. It's not about obligation. It's about a place to kind of let your hair down and really be intimate with someone and really let them know you. And it is a place of creativity and expression and a place of deep love making also. And the third mindset shift is to understand there's a lot of paradoxes and complexities when it comes to sex in marriage. And specifically, the paradox I talked about is the dirtiness of sex is the very thing that can sanctify your marriage, bring it sacred, make it special, and make sex even a sacrament. The dirtiness of it is not to be ashamed of or to run away from, but you can really embrace it and harness it in a way that brings a lot of goodness into your relationship. Thank you for listening, by the way. I'm grateful you're on this journey with me on my podcast. Please share this podcast with all of your married friends. And if you'd like help getting your marriage on, or help with mindset shifts in your marriage, or see that this good boy, good girl syndrome, so to speak, is holding you back, and you want to bring more goodness into your marriage through your sexuality, please be sure to check out our program, our Get Your Marriage On program. You'll find a link in the show notes. You might also be interested in joining us for an upcoming virtual getaway that we have in February, or a cruise that we're putting on next October. These are going to be great because you get to work with me and my team, and we do a deeper dive than I can over a podcast or over an email or over a mobile app about applying these principles of goodness and sex in your marriage. You'll find all these details on our website at getyourmarriageon.com and click events. Talk to you next Friday.